For a short time, Jishu had been in my life. And it was like, I mean, I'm 81 now. Jishu was such an important person. And she was in my life 5 years, if that. I started studying with her, I think in January 1993, when she was first Ox class that I took with her. And she died. No, maybe it was 92. This is the problem with my memory now. No, but it was 92 at the earliest, I think. You know, she died in March of 98. And somehow along the way there, it's a long story, one of my favorite stories, but I'm not going to tell it. I ended up becoming her student and ordaining with her. And it was very important to Bernie that she supervised her first Shuso, because that was important to Soto headquarters in Japan. In order for Jishu to become abbot of ZCNY, Bernie wanted to step back from being abbot. Jishu had to supervise her first Shuso in order to meet the Soto regulations for becoming an abbot. And Bernie was eager to turn that over to her. Jeff just changed my picture here, so I can't see. I'm not seeing you. I'm looking at me. This is very disconcerting.
I can flip it back, Ken.
I would like that, because I love to see the people I'm talking to. Otherwise, this gets crazy making. Thank you. Jishu did my Shuso entering ceremony in our Zendo on Staten Island, and stayed overnight. And the next morning I drove her to the airport, and she flew out to Santa Fe to meet Bernie, and they looked at the house that they were deciding to move into. They were leaving Yonkers. They were going to dedicate their life to basically the Zen Peacemaker order. Jishu had a vision for what the order was going to look like. The order was going to be organized in villages around the world, groups of peacemakers working together on peacemaking projects. And Bernie and Jishu were going to spend their life travel from village to village, staying anywhere from, maybe a month to 3 months at a village and bringing their skills and Bernie's charisma to help move projects, peacemaking projects to a new level. And then they would go on to another village. Bernie and Jishu had a disagreement there about what was for Bernie a relatively small point and a relatively big point for Jishu. Bernie thought that could be their whole life. They would be nomads, as Bernie saw it, and spend their whole life going from village to village. But Jishu said no. Jishu had to have a home base where even if they only made it back there for 2 weeks a year, they would have a home to come back to and chill out, just the two of them. And so she flew out and met Bernie. They got this house across the street, basically from Upaya, right next door. She came back. Shuso period, is 3 months. We were still in the first month of the Shuso period. They packed, they loaded the truck. They drove across the country to Santa Fe. In Santa Fe, within days of arrival, Jishu was unpacking. There were still many boxes to go when she had the heart attack and died. I didn't get to finish my Shuso period with her, finished with Bernie. But things kept changing. That was Bernie's life and Jishu's life with Bernie. At one point, this thing of getting her first Shuso, was so getting the Soto seal of approval for her becoming the abbot of ZCNY was very, very important to Bernie. But by the time I did my Shuso entering ceremony, ZCNY was in days of being no more. The plan was no longer for Jishu to become abbot of ZCNY. They were both leaving. They're both leaving Grayston. And ZCNY ceased to exist. And things changed. Bernie changed in some very good ways when he lost Jishu. I don't know if any of you knew him in those days. Bernie was kind of a rough customer in those days. But he depended on Jishu to be the softness in his life and in his relationships with other people. And when he lost her, one of the things that he realized as he mourned was that he was going to need to become his own Jishu. He was going to need to become his own softness. He became a much softer person. Um, um, I had lunch. No, I went over to be with him uh, the morning after Jishu's funeral. Uh, and it was just it was a, it was a moment. The funeral had been a very moving event, and especially for me, I think, or I don't know, especially for me, it was for me. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. I had the honor of being kind of like the chief mourner. Well, not really. Bernie clearly was the chief mourner, and Jishu's brother was there, and the parents was there. Uh, and it was clearly a different kind of loss for them than it was for me. But I was her senior student anyway. Uh, so I got to, I think, walk first in the procession behind the casket. I carried her transmission papers. And when we went back to get the ashes, it fell to me when they opened the oven to rake her bones out. Put on these heavy, it was still very hot. And to put on these heavy asbestos gloves, and it was this long, it's like a long hole, long metal hole, long handle, very long handle, to reach all the way in. And even after the cremation, when they opened the door, I could see Jishu at the end of this long oven. Like her skull was still intact, or appeared so. But when I pulled on the rake to pull it all forward, the skull crumbled to dust. We raked it out. And we took the ashes back from the bones that hadn't disintegrated for the ceremony. I had lost people close to me before, but after those losses, I always had this, kind of experience like that hadn't happened. Person was still alive. I was going to get a phone call or something that was all a mistake. Uh, after raking Jishu's ashes, I never expected one of those phone calls. Uh, I learned things from Jishu, important things. And I felt very close to her. But I realized last year, I'd only known her 5 years. There were so many people who knew her much better and longer. when she first died, I wanted Bernie, if I ever got transmission, to give me transmission from Jishu. There's like a precedent for that in the transmission of the light. And I felt very good when he agreed to do that. But then I guess he got a lot of flack for that. For saying he would do that from other members of our family, who thought it was a very bad precedent to give transmission from beyond the grave, that all kinds of people would come out of the woodwork having claiming to have received transmission from dead Roshis. But when I did Denkai the following January, Bernie did sign that document, Bernie Jishu. Subsequently, he didn't. You know, the Dharma transmission was just from Bernie. And Jishu would not have appeared on my lineage chart. But Bernie gave those of us who were getting transmission from him that year, I think there were about half a dozen of us, the option to kind of be a little creative on our lineage document. So the lineage document looked to me like a multi-petaled daisy. It's got about 80 petals. You know, kind of goes around in this circle, you know, from Shakyamuni through all the Indian guys, through Bodhidharma and the Chinese guys, and Dogen and the Japanese, and finally Mayazumi brings it to America. No Jishu in my lineage, though. Bernie than me. But it looked like a flower to me. So I added a stem to my flower, and I put 3 leaves on it. One for Gyudo Nakagawa Roshi, who had taught me to meditate, Zazen, how to sit, how to breathe. One for Roshi Bob Kennedy, who I had done my koans with while Bernie was at the other end of the world in California. And one for Jishu. Was my heart teacher. I cried more with Jishu than I had ever cried in my life until then. And I'd been in psychoanalysis for 7 years with somebody I thought was a very good and kind analyst, but I never cried like that with her. I don't think I ever cried with her. I seemed to cry all the time with Jishu. Touched my heart. Showed me how to look at myself. Showed me Zen practice as looking at yourself. showed me the precepts, not as rules of conduct, but as tools for reflection. She asked me some hard questions along the way, and she asked me some easy questions. She asked me once if I had the courage to be Bernie's teacher. That was an easy one. I took it, tell her right off. No way I have the courage to be Bernie's teacher. Bernie is too scary in those days. But she was gone in a flash. Way too soon. She was just beginning to blossom. Jishu was a late bloomer. And she was just blossoming as a teacher. And I worry, despite all the interest in the Zen Peacemakers, which is wonderful, that the heritage is being lost. And that's so important. Thank you. Invite others to share. Also, if there are questions, I'm happy to try to answer them, or maybe other people will have other insights to share.
We have a small enough group, Ken. I think people, if they want to share something, they can just unmute and
Yeah.
go ahead and speak. Yeah. Ken, perhaps not.
If not, people would like to see the other video. I think there's another video of pictures that Peter Cunningham put together.
Yeah, Peter did a nice job on these two. It's about the same length as the first one. If you'd like me to run that, I can do that now.
What would you like, folks?
Yes, definitely.
thanks everyone for being here today. Anybody have anything to comment or add or question? I imagine not everyone knows the history that's represented by some of those images, so be normal if you had a question. Chris, thanks.
Yeah, hi everybody. I think the time I knew Jishu a little bit. My dates roughly overlapped with Ken's. I met her in the early 90s. I'd been flying to New York from Chicago since the late 80s to try to study with Bernie. And I met Jishu in the early 90s. And then I moved to New York, and we were well into starting Zen Peacemakers at that point as Bernie was leaving Grayston. But Bernie and Jishu asked me if I would take Jishu's position at Pamsula and make something happen. So in that last segment, you might have seen some pictures of a woman named Eugenia and Jishu with some textiles. It was a beautiful, beautiful idea. Pamsula was an adaptation of a word, Pamsukala, which is a Sanskrit word, which was what, in theory, the historical Buddhist said that all liturgical garments should be made of cast off or what was presumably worthless material, either gnarled or stained by menstrual blood, and then transformed into something of immeasurable beauty and value, something that a monk could wear. And a great teaching moment for me. I walked in to Grayston the first time I met with Jishu, and I was taking on this role, and I was walking behind her, and she went and sat on the front side of the desk, and I sat, and she asked me to sit in her chair, so I did, and she proceeded to let me know how unhappy she was that I was doing this work. She was thrilled that there was somebody to make an effort. And she eventually became happy with the work that I did, but she was really frustrated that she felt like she was in a man's world. And this was a women-led project to benefit women. But I was the best she could do at the time, or the best that appeared. So that was the beginning of a relationship that I really appreciate. And also in that video, you saw pictures of Jishu before and after her stroke. Sort of an amazing chapter in her life to watch. She recovered remarkably quickly and adapted in ways that were really pretty unique. She lost a lot of her word capacity, both to write, and so she just learned a totally different keyboard with real. It was really interesting to watch, which points to her strength. I was always struck by her strength, and I don't know if she always felt strong, but she was very strong. She was strong in how she talked about resisting Bernie and finding her own voice. She was very strong in arguing for transparency and for things to be seen that needed to be seen and heard. Yeah, I think Ken gave a wonderful profile of a relationship and who she was. So I remember her at Auschwitz. I sat in the first Auschwitz retreat behind her and spent some time with her there. I remember her on the street where she struggled in the heat. That's all. I just wanted to share what little I could and the fondness that I had and the appreciation. And as Ken said, the preciousness of our history and our founders and people that carried this wonderful idea of Zen and social action into such a broad implementation, such a broad impact. So, yeah, it's wonderful to remember her today.
Thanks for your words, Chris. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
What Chris just reminded me of one of the challenges that she was working with. Uh, she had been, she was Bernie's student before they became romantically involved. And I think one of the things that was always hard for her, and played on her, I think, basic humility. She was probably the most humble person I've ever met. Was she was, I don't know if ever fully confident that in giving her transmission, that Bernie had, I think it was very hard for her to believe that she really deserved it as a Zen person. I think she trusted that he loved her, and uh, you know, uh, she could believe I think much more easily that that he gave her transmission because he loved her and was in love with her. That was easier for her to accept than that she was worthy of it as a Zen teacher. And part of the consequence of that was like just to give a Dharma talk was huge, a huge undertaking for her. Where Bernie would just, sit down and talk, I really had any idea walking in what he was going to talk about. Jishu prepared and prepared and prepared. And stressed about it. It was hard. Yet in her spontaneously in her spontaneous moments, when she wasn't trying to be a Zen teacher, then she was just, it was just there. I think it was when we were studying, when Ox class on I think it was on the paramitas, that Jishu had us do, we had this challenge to work on was to identify an activity in our lives that we did mindlessly. And for the duration of the course, to try to do it mindfully. Jishu said that she was going to do it with us. And she told us she was, we hadn't figured out what we were going to do yet, but she told us she was going to do brushing her teeth. That was the thing that she was going to do mindfully. To illustrate how mindlessly she brushed her teeth, she told us this, shared this anecdote about, I guess that morning, while she was in the bathroom brushing her teeth, the phone rang. She's in the kitchen now on the phone, talking on the phone, and she realizes that her voice isn't sounding quite normal. her speech is garbled. This is a little freaky, you know, because she's had the stroke. But she realizes it's, you know, there's nothing wrong with her body. She's just talking with, she's still got the toothbrush in her mouth. You know, that's, you know, I don't know whether you get it, but it's, Bernie as a Zen teacher seems sometimes to be on some sort of unapproachable height. Jishu as a teacher was just totally human. I did love her. I don't want her to be forgotten, folks. Help us figure out how to keep her memory alive.
Ken, I wonder if I could say something. This is you, Anderson from Great Plains Zen Center in Monroe. And I came to this because I always wished that I knew Jishu a lot better. I only met her a couple of times. I was at ZCLA on the opposite end of the country, but something that you were just touching on that really drew me to her and wished I knew her better was actually her, what I sort of heard was her vulnerability, which I think it takes a lot more courage to be vulnerable than to, appear to have it all together. And you've already said some things, but if anyone could add on that about how um, her sort of truth telling about not always feeling 100% confident in herself, because for me that was very, very meaningful to me, and I wished I had had more conversations with her. So I'd love to hear anybody's thoughts about that.
Thanks, Mila. Anyone have a comment or a response?
uh, uh, yeah, part of one of the ways in which that vulnerability, humility took shape was in, you know, was in a relationship with Bernie. And when it was a struggle for them, for both of them, to try to create a relationship of equals. Uh, I mean, it wasn't just hard for Jishu, it was hard for Bernie. Uh, uh, Jishu, they were married, had been married for a while. When I first met them, she always called him, and in public, she always called him sensei. Uh, And when I got to know them better, like, and we were alone, she called him Sensei, honey. Uh, and Bernie and Jishu were both very impressed by Nicholas and Pia and the equal partnership that they had forged. And they went to Switzerland a couple of times, kind of study with them, I mean, officially they went to lead the session or something, but I think they went really to learn from Nicholas and Pia. And Pia would really get on Jishu's case. It's like, come on, you're married, he's Bernie. I don't know that Jishu was ever able to do that. But she was, at least with some of us, even that she didn't hide. She was willing to let us see everything. That was the vulnerability. She had no backstage. You were in a house, you saw everything. You know, the morning I drove her to the airport when she was flying out to Santa Fe, she told me Santa Fe was her first choice. Bernie wanted Santa Barbara. And Jishu told me, I'm sure I'm sure we're gonna end up going to Santa Barbara. She was probably the most surprised person, she got it, Bernie agreed, okay, Santa Fe. She had much more influence in the relationship than she realized. Chris told you, gave you that vignette there of the dilemma of the woman and the man's world problem. It wasn't just, around Pamsula. Grayston became a burden. As hard as she was working. She came home one day. They didn't always see each other at Grayston, Sometimes they were, moving in different orbits. But she came home and she told Bernie she'd quit. And Bernie was very upset. And Bernie was all set on convincing Jishu to change her mind. So they took a vacation. And they flew to Hawaii, where there was a Zen dentist who took care of Bernie's teeth for free. And they spent time on the beach, and Bernie knew they'd have a lot of time together, which they didn't always have. And he was going to convince Jishu to withdraw her resignation. And that's where things stood when they flew to Hawaii. You know, if they came back, I don't know, like 10 days later. Maybe they stopped at ZCLA on the way out or the way out. Maybe you saw them there on that trip. But they arrived back in Yonkers with big news. Jishu was not pulling back her resignation. Bernie was resigning. And yet, you know, a couple of months later, Jishu's getting on the plane to fly out to Santa Fe, and she's sure she has no influence with Bernie.
We're coming up on the hour. Anyone else got a couple of minutes here? Anyone else have a question or a comment or something to share? And if not, Ken, do you want to just offer a few words to wrap us up?
Um, Jishu taught us. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go.
Sorry, just would you mind if I just say that I have this is the one thing that I have from Jishu. It's a little booklet
Yes.
with teachings from her. I am sure you know it. Heinz-Jürgen Metzger brought it, translated it, and published it in German, so I can read about her. And it touched me very much that you said, Ken, I don't want her to be forgotten. And I can say, I've never met her in person, but she's in my lineage, since we have a female lineage too, I got Chukai. So she's on that sheet for me, and I will never forget her.
Thank you, Kathleen.
I can just say just a few words. And this is Shogun from San Luis Obispo Zen Circle and ZCLA. And Ken, thank you so much. I never met her. I think I've been at ZCLA 25 years. And so this is the 26th year of her passing. Is that right? And yet at ZCLA, Roshi Igyoku talks about her. And of course, and Roshi Bernie. And in the Kanzeon room, there is that exact picture that Kathleen just held up on the altar there. And I'm in that Kanzeon room a lot, lighting candles and whatnot. And always struck by her beauty, her picture. And just, again, wanted to thank you so much. She's not on my lineage chart either, but boy, she's on my radar. And I really like that we did this, and we should do it more often and get more folks to hear these stories of our founders. And I don't know what wave of Zen Peacemakers it was, but we were all given the Dharma name Ongyo. So I am Kizan Shogun Ongyo, and my teacher Roshi Igyoku always signs my name or writes my name that way. So thank you, Ken, and Chris too, for your sharing.
Yeah, Jishu, they started the Angyo thing, I think. Maybe the year or two before my Tokido. The year before me was Claude Thomas, and I know he was Angyo. And I'm trying to, he was Anshin. Angyo. And I think the year before that might have been Michael O'Keefe. And he may have been the first, but I don't remember whether he was the first or Claude was the first. Peacemaker. That's a good note. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone that's hung together here for this hour or so. And Shogun, we did this last year, and I think we will annualize. So join us next year.